Hello, let me introduce you to Dr. Grazia Felisi, the Quality Assurance Head and Internal Auditor at Clinical Validation from Biopharmaceutical Findings, an Italian not-for-profit organization. In this presentation, she will explain how to conduct a multicenter and multinational clinical trial in rare diseases. Now, let's delve into the first question. When is there a need to conduct a clinical trial outside Europe?
Despite the market target represented by patients in Europe, in some cases, sponsors must go abroad to conduct their trial. The main reason is linked to the achievement of a sufficient sample size able to demonstrate the research hypothesis. And in the specific context of rare disease, the small number of eligible participants for a given studies added to the complex understanding of the natural history of a specific disease have major impact in the design and the conduction of a clinical trial. This was the case of the DEEP-2 study, a multicenter randomized open-label non-inferiority active controlled efficacy safety trial involving pediatric patients affected by transfusion-dependent hemoglobinopathies that was conducted in 23 sites, of which 17 were in the EU, Cyprus, Greece, Italy and UK, and 6 in non-EU countries, Egypt, Albania and Tunisia. To our knowledge, DEEP-2 represented the largest clinical trial on oral iron chelation in pediatric patients, generating clinical data applicable for regulatory purposes. The conduction of this trial in several countries was beneficial for a number of reasons. Firstly, it was possible to enroll a larger number of pediatric patients, 393 patients aged between 1 month and less than 18 years were enrolled. Also, the inclusion of population from North Africa, where transfusion-dependent hemoglobinopathies are common and still not well treated, allowed patients to access treatment not easily available. And finally, it was possible to investigate the efficacy and safety profile of a medicine across different ethical groups with possible different ethnic groups with possible different susceptibility to the drug.
The second question is, from a regulatory point of view, what were the main barriers you faced in the conduction of this multicenter and multinational trial, and which measures have you adopted to overcome them?
The three main regulatory challenges associated with conducting a multicenter, multicultural and multilingual pediatric trial, such the DEEP-2 study were first of all, a not harmonized and burdensome regulatory procedure for the clinical trial application. We interacted with more than 20 ethics committees and 7 different competent authorities, each one with their own procedures. To overcome these differences, we prepared a master submission package asking to our local contacts to adapt and translate each document as specifically requested. For example, in Greece, the ethics committee asked to evaluate the entire protocol in Greek. In Tunisia, pediatric trials with a non-market medicinal product were not permitted unless a specific authorization was obtained from the Ministry of Health. The cultural differences with the impact in the definition of common process for the obtaining of the informed consent were important barriers. In countries culturally far from European reality and where a different concept of parenthood prevails, there were relevant differences in the informed consent process. These issues made impracticable to harmonize the process. In fact, even if all countries acknowledge the need for collecting informed consent from parents or legal representatives, In most countries, both parents must consent for the participation of a child in the trial, contextually or in different moments. But in Egypt, the signature from only one parent was only accepted. Also, the content of the information sheet should be adapted to each national context. For example, contraception was a topic extremely delicate in Egypt, and the exact wording to be used requested a long discussion with the competent ethics committee. The direct interaction with local authorities guaranteed by the local reference person within the DIP consortium was essential to ensure an effective communication between the parties. And finally, the lack of standardized regulatory requirement for the study management, equivalent to the GCP guidance in Europe, represented another barrier. In Albania, the GCP had never been applied before. In Egypt and Tunisia, they were applied but not legally required. We therefore provided extensive training to the study staff with many visits of the sponsor delegated CROs at the site to guarantee the transfer of a standard working methodology for the study conduct. In addition, all clinical monitors were requested to use the same standard operating procedure, form, templates, which were provided by the sponsor who maintained strict oversight of overall activities, participating directly in many visits.
The third question is it possible to obtain a marketing authorization in the European Union if the data collected come from patients enrolled outside Europe?
Yes, it is possible to obtain a market authorization in EU if the data collected come from patients enrolled outside Europe. But in order to obtain this approval, clinical trial must enroll patients from at least one EU member state or European Economic Area country. Generally, for market authorization in Europe, the EMEA recommends that the number of patients reflects the population of the target indication in terms of demographic variables such as age and gender. And the reason is that the response to a specific drug is affected by the genetic characteristic of the target population. DIP2 randomized 393 patients between March 2014 and June 2016 across 23 clinical sites in EU and non-EU countries. 54% of patients were from North Africa and 46% were from Europe. This was required to ensure a sample size per group which was large enough to obtain reliable estimates of group and means a group by treatment interaction.
In light of the new European regulation, are the procedures adopted for the regulatory application of the DIP2 study still valid?
Yes, the procedures that we adopted for the regulatory application of the DIP2 study are still possible. In fact, the new European Union clinical trial regulation is a harmonized regulatory framework for the evaluation, authorization and supervision of clinical trial throughout Europe, and the same approach was used for the DIP2 studies. Even if legal framework of the conduction of clinical trial in Europe has changed since the DIP2 was conducted, the approach adopted by the DIP consortium already reflected the idea of standardization promoted by the new regulation. In fact, starting from a core package identical for all countries, all sites, like the part 1 of the clinical trial regulation, and adapting the country site specific document such as informed consent, suitability and so on, to the national requirement, like the part 2 of the clinical trial regulation, allowed to maintain a centralized governance of the authorization process. So, while the new regulation compared with the DIP2 context makes process more efficient since sponsor can submit one online application, only one application via the clinical trial information system for approval, On the other side, clinical trial, particularly in rare disease, require to go outside Europe. So in any case, the preparation and the management of the entire process would require a centralized oversight and specific country adaptation, for which the presence of a multinational, multi-stakeholder network can represent a remarkable added value.
What about lay summaries? In today's clinical trial landscape, patient centricity and transparency have become paramount. In fact, in October 2021, the Clinical Trials Expert Group, a working group of the European Commission, adopted a set of recommendations entitled Good Lay Summary Practice to help prepare, write, translate and disseminate summaries of clinical results in lay language to non-experts and minors, in order to help patients and the audience involved to understand the purpose, methods, results, risks and benefits of participating in a trial. Lay summaries are a legal requirement for all clinical trials with a trial site in the EU and must be uploaded to EU portal 12 months after the end of a study, 6 months for studies which involve children. To help guide the creation of a lay summary intended for children, the working group divided the child audiences into different age groups. In fact, as you can see, for the DEEP2 study, which involved pediatric patients aged between 1 month and less than 18 years, several lay summaries have been prepared based on the different age groups. For children 6 years or younger, we mainly use pictures and cartoons, whereas for the next age groups, more text has been used as long as it is simple and has age-appropriate vocabulary. Another children engagement strategy implemented was to describe, in the deep lay summary, what the child did during the study, instead of explaining what the researchers were doing. In addition, to ensure accessibility and understanding, these lay summaries have been translated and adapted to align with the different countries involved in the clinical trial. So today we have explored the context in which it becomes necessary to conduct a multinational clinical trial and analyzed the main challenges that may hamper its implementation. We investigated whether it is possible to obtain a marketing authorization in the EU if the data collected come from patients enrolled outside the EU, and if the procedures adopted for the regulatory application of the DEEP2 study continue to be valid in the light of the new European regulation. Thank you for your attention and stay tuned.